I transformed into a girl just to land my dream job. Winston stood quietly at his workstation, carefully piping tiny rosettes of cream onto a tray of miniature tarts. His eyebrows tightened in concentration as he worked, each movement slow, precise, and controlled. In the intense rhythm of the kitchen, perfection mattered. "Order up," the head chef suddenly shouted from across the kitchen. The loud call broke Winston's focus. He quickly finished the final tart and slid the tray into the blast chiller. "Yes, chef," Winston replied, wiping his hands on his apron as he rushed toward the pass. He grabbed the order ticket and scanned it quickly, already planning the ingredients and steps in his mind. But while he worked, a burst of laughter and excited voices drifted from the other side of the kitchen. Curious, Winston glanced over. A group of cooks had gathered around the newest pastry chef, a young woman named Evelyn. Her fiery red hair was tied neatly into a bun, and she smiled as everyone admired her dessert. "Your lemon meringue pie is unbelievable," one of the line cooks said excitedly. "Seriously, how do you get the meringue that perfectly golden?" Evelyn laughed softly, the sound light and musical. "Oh, it's just a technique I learned while training in Paris," she said casually. "I can show you sometime if you'd like." Winston turned back to his station, trying to ignore the uncomfortable twist in his stomach. He had been working at the restaurant for over a year, producing elegant desserts day after day. Yet he had never received that kind of praise. Later that night, after the dinner rush finally ended, Winston remained alone in the kitchen. He wiped down his station carefully, making sure everything was spotless. The head chef, Marcus, a tall man with a serious expression, walked over holding a stack of papers. "Winston," Marcus said, "I've been reviewing next month's menu. I think we're going to change the direction of the dessert section. Something more creative and modern." Winston felt a sudden drop in his stomach. He had spent weeks developing new recipes for that menu. "Of course, chef," he replied calmly. "What did you have in mind?" Marcus hesitated. "Well, actually, I'm giving Evelyn the opportunity to design the new dessert menu. Her experience in French pastry could bring something fresh to the restaurant." The words hit Winston hard like a punch to the chest. Still, he forced himself to stay composed. "I understand," he said quietly. "There's nothing you need to do," Marcus added quickly. "Just focus on preparing the desserts once the new menu is finalized." With that, Marcus walked away. Winston stood silently at the counter, gripping the edge so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He had dedicated himself completely to this job. Long hours, endless practice, constant improvement. Yet somehow recognition always seemed to slip past him. That night, lying awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, an idea slowly began forming in his mind. It was risky. Possibly even career-ending if anyone discovered the truth. But the more he thought about it, the more convinced he became that it might be his only chance to prove what he could really do. The next morning, Winston called the restaurant and reported that he was sick. Instead of going to work, he sat down at his computer and began creating a completely new identity. First came the name, Summer Haze. Then he created social media accounts, Instagram, Twitter, and even a professional website. He carefully chose a stock photo for the profile, a smiling woman with warm brown eyes and soft honey blonde hair. 4 weeks, Winston spent every free moment building Summer's online reputation. He posted photos of beautiful pastries and desserts. Some were his own creations while others came from royalty-free sources. He wrote detailed blog posts explaining baking techniques, flavor pairings, and modern pastry trends. Slowly, Summer's online following began to grow. As the account gained attention, Winston felt a strange mixture of pride and guilt. The recognition he had struggled to achieve for years was suddenly happening, but under a name that wasn't truly his. Yet something else surprised him. The identity of Summer felt comfortable. With every post and message, he found himself slipping more naturally into the role. There was a confidence and brightness in Summer's persona that Winston had never felt before. 2 months later, an opportunity appeared. A prestigious restaurant, one Winston had dreamed of working at for years, announced they were hiring a new pastry chef. Without allowing himself to hesitate, Winston submitted an application. Under the name Summer Haze. The resume was flawless. The portfolio impressive. To Winston's shock, Summer was invited for an interview. Now he faced a serious problem. He couldn't send someone else. And he couldn't reveal the truth. After days of anxiety, Winston made a bold decision. He would go to the interview himself. As Summer, he nervously visited several stores, buying a blonde wig similar to the profile picture. Then came makeup along with a stylish but professional outfit. The night before the interview, Winston practiced for hours. He worked on Summer's voice, posture, expressions, and personal story. The next morning he stood in front of the mirror. The person staring back hardly looked like Winston. Honey blonde hair framed a carefully made-up face. A navy blazer and pencil skirt created a polished, professional look. A delicate gold necklace rested at the collar. For a moment Winston simply stared. Summer stared back. When he arrived at the restaurant, a strange calm settled over him. He approached the hostess with a warm, confident smile. "Hello," he said softly. "My name is Summer Hayes. I have an interview with Chef Rodriguez." The interview went far better than expected. Chef Rodriguez listened with fascination as Summer spoke about pastry techniques and modern dessert trends. When she presented her portfolio, the chef's eyes widened. "Your work is incredible," he said while flipping through the pages. "I especially love your version of the classic opera cake. Lavender and honey is a brilliant combination." Summer smiled proudly. "Thank you, chef," she replied. "I believe great pastry respects tradition but isn't afraid to explore new flavors." By the time the interview ended, Summer walked out of the restaurant with a strong feeling that she had succeeded. As her heels tapped against the sidewalk, she felt something unexpected. For the first time in a long while, Winston felt hopeful. A strange mix of excitement and fear rushed through her chest. She had actually done it. They believed she was Summer. But now a new question filled her mind. What happens next? The answer arrived sooner than she expected. The very next day an email appeared with a job offer. Summer didn't hesitate for a second. She accepted. As the start date drew closer, Winston spent more and more time living as Summer. Every evening became practice. She learned how to walk naturally in heels, refined her makeup skills, and carefully studied every detail of Summer's personality. Eventually, with the help of a kind and understanding doctor, she even began hormone therapy, another step toward the identity she had created. The first few weeks at the new restaurant were intense. Summer threw herself completely into the work. Long hours in the pastry kitchen pushed her creativity to its limits, but the results spoke for themselves. Her desserts were bold, artistic, and unlike anything the team had seen before. Soon the kitchen began buzzing with her reputation. She became known for unusual flavor pairings and beautifully plated desserts that looked almost too perfect to eat. But behind the success was a heavy weight. Maintaining two lives was exhausting. Winston had to constantly switch between identities, managing Summer's growing online presence while working demanding shifts at the restaurant. Sleep became rare. Anxiety became constant. At any moment someone could discover the truth. Everything she had built could disappear. Yet as the months passed, something surprising happened. Winston began looking forward to becoming Summer. What had once felt like a disguise slowly transformed into something deeper. Summer wasn't just a role anymore. She felt real, perhaps even more real than Winston had ever felt before. One night, after a particularly brutal dinner service, Summer stayed behind to finish cleaning the kitchen. Chef Rodriguez remained as well. The experienced chef watched Summer quietly for a moment before speaking. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "you've become incredibly important to this team." Summer looked up, surprised. "Your creativity has changed our entire dessert program," Chef Rodriguez continued. "You've brought life and excitement back into this kitchen." Warmth filled Summer's chest. "Thank you, chef," she said softly. "That really means a lot." Chef Rodriguez paused before speaking again. "But it's not just your talent," she added. "We value you as a person too. This kitchen is like a family. And families support each other." Summer felt her throat tighten. Did the chef somehow know? Before she could say anything, Chef Rodriguez gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Whatever struggles you're facing," the chef said kindly, "you don't have to deal with them alone." Something inside Summer finally broke. Tears filled her eyes and the truth began spilling out before she could stop herself. She told the entire story. About Winston. About being overlooked and pushed aside. About creating Summer as a desperate chance to prove her worth. And about how that false identity slowly became something real. When she finished speaking, she waited nervously for judgment. Instead, Chef Rodriguez simply smiled. She pulled Summer into a warm embrace. "Oh, my dear," she said gently. "You've been carrying this burden all by yourself." Summer blinked back tears. "To everyone here," the chef continued, "you are Summer. That's the person we know. The person we respect." Those words lifted a weight Summer hadn't realized she'd been carrying for so long. In the weeks that followed, she began fully embracing her new life. She shared the truth with her coworkers, expecting confusion or rejection. Instead, she received support, encouragement, friendship. Not everyone understood, of course. Some people from her past slowly disappeared from her life. But new friendships replaced them, people who valued her honesty and strength. As time passed, Summer watched her life transform. Her body slowly began changing as well, finally reflecting the person she had always felt like inside. At the same time, her confidence in the kitchen grew stronger than ever. She experimented with bold new ideas and pushed her creativity further. Exactly 1 year after that life-changing interview, Summer stood in her own kitchen at home. On the counter sat a beautiful cake she had spent hours designing. It wasn't just a dessert. It was a symbol. Each tier represented a different chapter of her journey: the uncertainty, the courage, the transformation. Summer carefully added the final decoration and stepped back to admire it. For the first time in her life, she felt something she had searched for during so many years. She finally felt like herself. As Summer stepped back from the table, admiring the cake she had just finished, her reflection appeared faintly in the window beside her. For a moment, she simply stared. The woman looking back at her seemed confident, peaceful, and genuinely happy. Summer smiled softly at the reflection. The identity she had once created as a temporary disguise had slowly grown into something real, something far more honest than the life she had lived before. A knock on the door broke the quiet moment. Her guests had arrived. Friends from the restaurant, the people she now considered her true family, had come to celebrate with her. As Summer walked toward the door, a calm sense of belonging settled inside her. She had finally discovered where she belonged in the world, not only as a talented pastry chef, but as a woman living openly and honestly. The evening quickly filled with laughter, stories, and the warm energy of people who cared deeply about one another. Plates of delicious food covered the table and the room buzzed with joy. When it came time to cut the cake, Summer felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. Chef Rodriguez lifted her glass and smiled proudly. "To new beginnings," she announced. Summer raised her own glass, her voice steady. "To new beginnings." Looking around at the smiling faces surrounding her, she knew that whatever challenges the future held, she would face them as her true self, Summer. In the months that followed, Summer's career continued to rise. Her creative desserts and bold flavor combinations began attracting attention from food critics and culinary professionals across the industry. Invitations soon arrived for competitions, television cooking shows, and special guest appearances. But success wasn't limited to her professional life. Summer also began exploring new friendships and communities. She joined a support group for transgender professionals working in the culinary world. For the first time in her life, she felt completely understood by people who shared similar experiences. One evening after an emotional meeting, Summer stepped outside the building and accidentally bumped into someone. "Sorry," the woman said quickly. Summer looked up. It was Evelyn, the pastry chef from Winston's former workplace. For a split second, fear flashed through Summer's mind. What if Evelyn recognized her? But Evelyn's expression showed no sign of recognition. Only kindness. "I really need to start watching where I'm walking," Evelyn laughed nervously. Summer relaxed and smiled. "No problem," she replied. "It happens." They began talking, and to Summer's surprise, the conversation felt easy. Without the tension of past rivalry or jealousy, she found herself enjoying Evelyn's company. Evelyn spoke enthusiastically about pastry, creative ideas, and new techniques. Before they parted, Evelyn hesitated. "I'm always trying to meet more people in the culinary world," she said. "Would you like to get coffee sometime?" Summer paused for a brief moment before nodding. "I'd like that." What began as a simple coffee meeting slowly grew into a genuine friendship, and eventually something deeper. Evelyn listened patiently as Summer eventually shared her past and the journey that had brought her here. Their shared love of pastry and mutual respect created a strong connection between them. As Summer approached her second year living as her true self, another opportunity appeared. A major food magazine wanted to feature rising pastry chefs, and they wanted to include her story. But this meant publicly revealing her transition on a national level. Summer struggled with the decision. She was proud of who she had become, but she worried about negative reactions and unwanted attention. It was Evelyn who finally helped her decide. "Your story could inspire so many people," Evelyn said gently, squeezing her hand. "There are young chefs out there who feel lost or afraid. Seeing someone like you succeed could give them hope." With the support of Evelyn and her friends at the restaurant, Summer agreed to the interview. She spoke openly about her journey, the challenges she faced and the freedom she discovered by living authentically. "Embracing who I truly am changed everything," Summer told the interviewer. "It even changed the way I create desserts. When you stop hiding yourself, creativity flows in ways you never expected." When the magazine was released, the response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from people across the country. Young chefs questioning their identity, parents trying to better understand their children, and professionals who wanted to make their workplaces more inclusive. There was some negativity, but it was far outweighed by support and admiration. Chef Rodriguez proudly stood beside her throughout it all, even introducing new inclusivity initiatives within the restaurant. "This kitchen should be a place where everyone feels respected," she told the staff during a meeting. As Summer's reputation grew, she began teaching pastry classes as well. She made it her mission to create a welcoming space for every student. One day after class, a nervous student approached her. "Chef Summer," they said quietly, "I think I might be transgender, but I've been scared it would ruin my chances in this industry." Summer felt a powerful wave of emotion. She remembered that fear all too well. Gently placing a hand on the student's shoulder, she spoke softly. "The path isn't always easy," she said. "But being true to yourself is worth every challenge. And the culinary world is changing. There's a place for all of us." The student's eyes filled with tears of relief. In that moment, Summer realized something profound. The identity she had once created out of desperation had grown into something far greater. She had become a source of hope for others. 3 years after walking into the restaurant as Summer for the very first time, she stood once again in her kitchen at home preparing another special cake. This one resembled the cake from her coming-out celebration, but now it had additional layers. Each tier represented an important milestone in her journey. Evelyn stepped behind her, wrapping her arms gently around Summer's waist. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Just like you." Summer smiled and leaned into the embrace. "Thank you," she said softly. "For loving me. For supporting me through everything." "Always," Evelyn replied. Later that evening, the restaurant hosted a celebration in Summer's honor. The entire staff gathered to celebrate not just her success, but the positive changes her journey had inspired. When Summer revealed the cake and explained the meaning behind each layer, there were tears throughout the room. The bottom layer represented her past life as Winston, a dark chocolate cake hiding vibrant rainbow colors inside. The middle layer symbolized the early days of becoming Summer, a delicate lavender and honey cake. The top layer represented the life she had now, complex, vibrant, and perfectly balanced. As everyone shared slices of the cake, Summer felt overwhelming gratitude. Her journey had been unexpected and difficult at times, but it had led her exactly where she needed to be. Later, as the celebration quieted, Chef Rodriguez pulled her aside. "I saw something special in you from the very beginning," the chef said warmly. "Even before you fully believed in yourself." Summer wiped away a tear. "I couldn't have done this without you," she replied. Chef Rodriguez smiled. "And now," she said thoughtfully, "I have a proposition for you.